The European Union is no stranger to crisis, but 2022 has been a particularly difficult year. The war in Ukraine has sent shockwaves across Europe as leaders struggle to support Ukraine while dealing with the economic fallout. Now they also have to contend with a corruption scandal as a top European lawmaker is accused of taking bribes from Qatar in return for political influence. All those challenges are leading to serious soul-searching as EU leaders meet for their final summit of the year in Brussels.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent Ukrainians pouring out of their country by the millions, and the refugees were warmly received as Europeans opened their doors to them. That solidarity was also visible at the top, with the EU's leaders coming together decisively to rally around Ukraine and to condemn Russia.
Tonight, European leaders were fully aligned in condemning the atrocious and unprovoked attacks. Now we have to meet the moment. We will hold the Kremlin accountable. The package of massive and targeted sanctions European leaders approved tonight clearly demonstrates that.
The strong stand by the EU against Moscow also reinvigorated the transatlantic alliance and helped prompt Sweden and Finland to take the historic decision to end decades of neutrality and join NATO.
Most people thought for a long time after the collapse of the Soviet Union that there could be some sort of neutral space between the West and the East. But with the Russian invasion, it became blatantly clear that this was not the case, and it was time to take one consequent step, and that was to apply to become a NATO member.
But for all that has been achieved in the way of support for Ukraine, the crisis has exposed some deep cracks in the EU system. Many in Europe are concerned about the bloc's survival in a changing world.
What we need is a will of the 27 member states to build a real European Union that can be effective and resilient in the world of tomorrow. Because the world of tomorrow, let's be very clear about that, it's not a world of member states or nations. It will be a world of blocks of empires.
A stronger European Union means acting as a collective. But member states have to be prepared to cede more sovereignty to Brussels to be able to do that. But faced with an energy crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine, EU member states have increasingly gone the other way, pursuing their national interests as they seek to shield their own economies and populations from the war's consequences.
Our special correspondent, Aya Ibrahim, is covering this summit and joins us now. Aya, Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to dominate the agenda in Europe. What are EU leaders saying as they arrive for the summit?
Well, a lot of them are reaffirming their support for Ukraine. It's going to be a big challenge for European leaders to try and help Ukraine through this particularly difficult phase of the war, as Russia has increased and accelerated its attack on key infrastructure within Ukraine. And EU leaders are going to be focused on how to help Ukraine, get through this winter. And part of that is an 18 billion euro loan package that has just been approved a couple of days ago by EU leaders for Ukraine, and that is set to be dispersed in 2023. So definitely something that is big on the agenda, with EU leaders reaffirming their support for Ukraine.
Well, with respect to that support, the EU, of course, is eager to present a united front with respect to Ukraine. How solid, though, is that support among member states?
Well, Hungary has proven challenging, to say the least, when it comes to support for Ukraine throughout the crisis. Virtually since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has at times opposed sanctions on Russian energy. And just over the past 2 weeks, we witnessed what can only be described as a showdown between the 26 members and Hungary, when Hungary vetoed that aid package that I was just talking about. Initially, they had voted that package, and that move by Hungary was widely seen as a retaliatory move, because the EU was blocking recovery funds for Hungary because of its violations of rule of law clauses in the EU. Now, that has been resolved since, and now that package is indeed underway, but we can always expect Hungary to be a challenge to that unity.
Now, the EU Parliament has been rocked by a corruption scandal. That must be an issue for leaders meeting there in Brussels today. Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. The issue is really omnipresent here in Brussels. And we saw the European Parliament President, Metsola, arrive today and essentially repeat the same words that she did a couple of days ago in Strasbourg right after the scandal unfolded, which is that she is going to focus on cleaning house. They want to get to the bottom of this for sure, and expressed her shock at the time, even in Strasbourg. She said that European democracy was under attack because of this scandal. But it is important to note to our international audiences that the European Parliament is different from the body that is convening today. We are talking about the European Council, that is the leaders of the member states, but of course it is a scandal that affects the integrity and the integrity of the entire union. However, when it comes to reform and when it comes to action, the impetus is really on the European Parliament. And historically, MEPs have opposed more transparent laws, for example, more transparent rules that would force them to disclose when they meet with politicians from third countries. So the impetus on them, and also on the investigation that's currently ongoing, for us to get full clarity on what exactly is going on at the European Parliament.
Ayat, thank you so much. Our special correspondent, Ayat Ibrahim, there in Brussels.